This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
The start of the NFL season is tonight. Chiefs, Texans, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 7:30, but we got lots of football to get into for the next 60 minutes. Josh Hennig, this is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. The PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. We got Andy McNamara, fantasy sports analyst and NFL analyst for Sportsnet. He will join us each and every week to talk fantasy sports and the NFL here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, as you saw on Twitter, you hit that Ask Andy Twitter on the hashtag or on the text board. You can at 973 ESPN at Josh Hennig or 609-403-0973 for all of your NFL and fantasy football questions. Hashtag Ask Andy. Each and every week here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles back in action this Sunday. Of course, we got football tonight. We have football all weekend long right here on 97.3 ESPN. Also, what an incredible night in the NBA playoffs last night. I mean, what on earth was that magic that we saw last night? Not just one, but two overtimes last night. I mean, that was incredible. Absolutely, positively incredible. Loved every single minute of it. Such an awesome thing to see the Raptors and the Celtics. And I know some of you out there being like, oh, come on. How can you be excited to see that? Well, I'm excited because you want to see good basketball in the playoffs. And I don't care that I went double overtime. I was loving it. I was all into it. I was like, I can't believe this is still going on, and see how exhausted those guys were after the game. It was absolute entertainment. And by the way, right here on 97.3 ESPN, Game 7 tomorrow night. Coverage begins at 8:30. Let's go. Game 7 here on 97.3 ESPN. And I loved it also because when you watch the Celtics and the Raptors, I know some people are like, well, those are the two teams the Sixers have lost to in the last 2 years. Just because the Sixers can't get over the hump doesn't mean that I can't appreciate good basketball, okay? And it was good basketball. It was a lot of fun to watch, to see those guys go blow for blow. And realistically, the Celtics at times were lucky to be in that game. Let's be realistic. They didn't shoot very well last night overall. They had some clutch moments and clutch points in the game, but they themselves were not a great team last night. So that was very interesting to watch how that all came together. Of course, today we got the start of the NFL season, Chiefs, Texans, and one of the interesting storylines tonight, Chiefs will have a limited attendance of 22% capacity. I am very interested to see what exactly happens with a crowd that is 22% in a building like Kansas City. Kansas City is one of the biggest home field advantages in the NFL. You could argue that between Kansas City, Seattle, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans, those are probably, the top 5 home field advantages in the entire NFL? And now you're sitting at 22% capacity. I can't wait to find out exactly what that looks and sounds like. Because I honestly have no idea what that is going to look or sound like. And how much that could impact the game, because there's many times, when you go back and watch that Patriots-Chiefs playoff games and regular season games, and you see the impact of those home field advantages, I think it's something that you have to factor in. That the majority of the time when you go out and say, well, I'm picking the Chiefs. Why? Because they're at home. Or I'm picking this team because they're at home. And now you only have 22% capacity. That could completely change how the NFL season starts. Because if everything goes okay, eventually they're going to have more fans return to the building as things get better in the country when it comes to COVID. But in the meantime, we don't know when that is going to be. We don't know, is that going to be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks? And what is someone's record going to be by that point in time? And a team like the Chiefs, I'm telling you, I would chalk up that at a minimum, half of their wins at home every year are because of that home crowd. These stadiums become like a weapon against the opponent for how loud they can get. Just look at the Eagles Super Bowl run. The fact that they had the home field advantage versus the Falcons and the Vikings was massive. It was so important. And now, going into this season, you're not going to have that same massive advantage on your side. Now, I still think the Chiefs are going to win tonight. And we'll get to my picks for tonight, as well as looking ahead for the full NFL season again with Andy McNamara coming up less than 10 minutes from now. And also later in the show, we'll give you my projections. But in the past, when the team that won the Super Bowl, they get that game, that home game, that opportunity to show up for their fans. In the last 10 years, those teams are 7-3. And the 3 times that those teams lost, the Ravens were a shell of themselves from the year before when they lost to the Broncos. The Giants, that was a division rival versus the Cowboys. And the Patriots, that was basically a game that was back and forth, could have gone either way. But what do all those games have in common? Okay, you're hitting at 70%, but that's with the home field advantage. Losing home field advantage in football is going to have a tremendous impact on this season. Just look at the college game. I'm not saying Army would have played that much better if they would have had a crowd there. I'm sorry, Navy versus BYU. But at least would have been maybe a competitive game instead of an absolute positive blowout and a dismantling. Maybe they would have had a slight bit of a chance to actually score more points. You look at what happens when there's a home field advantage. It changes everything. Now, they say about 17,000 are expected in the 73,000 stadium. And I'm looking at the picture right now for outside of Kansas City Stadium. It doesn't even look like a football parking lot anymore. It looks something closer to, for lack of a better analogy, like maybe like if you went to a big high school game. It looks more like the Holy Spirit High School football parking lot than it does Kansas City Chiefs. It's incredible to see how this is going to impact the game. And I think that's one of the reasons why, no matter who you are, when you look at the lines for tonight, you have to scratch your head a little bit. Is almost 10 points a little too much to be rolling with the Chiefs? We know football might be sloppy because there's been no preseason. That over-under looks a little bit less appealing, especially for the over, even if it is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Texans, with 2 quarterbacks who are among the best in the NFL. Again, Texans, Chiefs tonight. Coverage begins at 7:30 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we are your home for all of Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night football action all season long right here on 97.3 ESPN. The PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open at 609-403-0973. Also, aside from Andy Mack coming up tonight, we will get into some of the Eagles news that came out today because, as you saw at 97.3 ESPN.com, earlier in the day, Jason Peters, news comes out that he's got a new deal. A few hours later, Lane Johnson gets a new deal. And I'll tell you a little bit later in the show why all of you need to be applauding and praising Lane Johnson. Because there's something about what happened today that this is not the first time he has sacrificed for this team. And it might not be the last either. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Andy McNamara, fantasy football, NFL season 2020. What does he think? We'll get into all that coming up next, right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Begin on the conversation. NFL opens tonight. Huge NBA playoff game last night. Game 7 tomorrow night. Get all the action right here on 97.3. Also tonight, Chiefs and Texans right here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, all of the NFL season, the fantasy football and more. He'll join us each and every week. He is Andy McNamara. You've heard him here previously on 97.3 ESPN. He will be a regular here on Game Night. National Fantasy Sports host and analyst for Sportsnet. Also NFL analyst for Sportsnet. And he joins us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on Game Night. Andy, you excited?
Oh, Josh, brother, I am so pumped. I didn't know, like the rest of the world, if we would get here, if we would get to the beginning of the NFL season, we're here. We're going to hold our breath. We're going to hope that everything works out. But I'm so excited for this NFL season. The fantasy football drafts are done. It is go time.
Let's get into some of these games tonight before we get to the rest of the slate of games. Tonight, obviously, there's a lot of big names to watch out for, but I think one of the things that we have to look out for in this game, and it's not a specific fantasy element, but it could impact fantasy, is, I was talking about this earlier, 22% capacity for Kansas City. This is one of the greatest home field advantages in the entire league. I argue they're top 5, but now only 22% capacity. How do you think that might impact this game?
It's a great question, and that's really what we're going to have to look at throughout the whole league, depending, right? Seattle, too. Baltimore. Like, there's a Philly. Like, there's a whole bunch of different stadiums that have those home field advantages. I think it has to play a factor. So maybe what we see to a certain degree is sort of what, like, the NBA and NHL bubble has, where there really is no advantage and there is just a game. And some places are going to have to pump in crowd noise. You know, how loud is that going to be able to be? It's going to be weird. And it does take away, I think it has to, that certain element of the fans. With that taken away, like, listen, it goes back and forth, right, between Kansas City and Seattle for, like, the Guinness Book of World Records for loudest stadiums and fans. It's not tonight.
No, definitely not tonight. They might go the opposite direction on the record, honestly. Might be the quietest game in Chiefs history because we know how long back that franchise goes. So let's get into the players on the field. I look at these quarterbacks. We know who the quarterbacks are, but I'm a little concerned because you mentioned this. I heard you last night about Will Fuller. I love Deshaun Watson. Personally, I'm a huge fan of his since he was in college. I've been on the Deshaun Watson hype train for years. But your receivers are Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, and Randall Cobb, and I feel like between the three of them, they have a laundry list full of injury history. I'm a little concerned about Deshaun Watson and any Texan player's value in fantasy.
100%, Josh. Yeah, like Brandon Cooks, questionable for tonight. Okay. Is that just for tonight? Is it for the season? Will Fuller, healthy now. Like you heard me say last night on my Canada-wide show, was, all right, wait till next week. Is it guaranteed there's going to be a soft tissue thing popping up for Will Fuller? It's just happened. Randall Cobb is he's a fantasy vacuum at this point in his career, Josh. He just, any value to anybody else. He's a leech. He just sucks it away. You did it last year in Dallas, took away valuable targets. So Randall Cobb, you have to. Kenny Stills, okay, can he step up finally? I don't know. Kiki Cutie, he hasn't been able to stay healthy either. Like, actually, one sneaky guy as like a floor and like a cheap sort of DraftKings pop into your lineup at a value. Darren Fells was actually pretty good, touchdown dependent, but pretty good last year for a real cheap tight end. So I actually think that could be, if you're sort of punting on like a DFS contest side, Fells could be an option. But I think it has to hurt Deshaun Watson. But one guy, Josh, one guy who I think is going to surprise big time, especially in PPR, is David Johnson.
Okay, I got to hear this explanation then. David Johnson, he's another guy who can't stay healthy, man.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? This is what we have to look at. Now, it wasn't that long ago. David Johnson was what? Second, third guy off your fantasy board? Wasn't that long ago. And the injuries he's had, they've been like wrist sort of arm ones. Like it's not like he's blown out 2 ACLs type of thing. So for David Johnson in a prove it mode where he's really looked at, if I'm David Johnson, I got a huge chip on my shoulder. I was thought of as the scrap piece to DeAndre Hopkins. I was the man a couple years ago. And think about it. With all these injured receivers, who the heck is Deshaun Watson going to throw to? Darren Fells is a catch and fall down tight end. We just talked about him. Johnson in PPR as a rock solid RB2. I'm not putting him in my RB1 conversation. But if I draft David Johnson as a flex or depth running back with a ceiling, and if he reaches that RB2 in a PPR format, I think it's very doable. Duke Johnson is just a change of pace still. So I think David Johnson, if he can stay on the field, is going to have a great year.
Let's flip it over to the Chiefs. We know about Mahomes, but there's a lot of weapons for Mahomes to get the ball to. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They drafted him to play running back. But is there a guy on the Chiefs that you point to and say that guy might take a step back early on in the year because there's only so many touches to go around?
I think the case where people continuously overvalue and really have for the whole career is Sami Watkins. I'm not a Sami Watkins guy. This is another player who, can he stay healthy for 4 weeks in a row? And when he does, his only actual good statistical season and fantasy football real relevant season was his sort of the rookie year, just shy of 1,000 yards. Really that second season where he still missed 3 games in 2015 with the Buffalo Bills. Now, with the Rams in 2017, he had 8 touchdowns, which is great, but only 593 yards. He just can't stay healthy. And Sammy Watkins is one of those guys I feel that you chase. He'll have one game for 130 and then do nothing for 3 weeks and then have a big game. It's that's somebody who I think continuously gets overvalued and who I purposely stay away from on my fantasy teams because I can't trust him.
Andy McNamara joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. You get him every week for your fantasy football and NFL analysis. He's a national fantasy sports host analyst for Sportsnet. Andy McNamara at AndyMC81. Also in this game tonight, I believe we all assume we're going to see some sloppy football to start the season. So are you feeling okay about the offenses as we go on the field? Or are you cautiously optimistic? Because I know whether someone's playing year-round fantasy, whether they're playing DFS, whatever the situation may be, or if you're someone who's placing down some bets tonight, you're looking at these teams and the natural instinct is to say points, but we might not see as many points tonight.
And here's where I come at it, Josh. I think we're going to see more points tonight because of, to your original mention there, was because of the sloppiness, but on defense. We've seen the last how many years, because preseason's been shortened, of sloppy tackling, which always surprises me. These guys have been tackling since you're 8 years old. You forget to tackle every offseason. I don't understand it, but we see it every year. So I think what we see is sloppy tackling, which could lead to higher scoring. So you look at the over-under tonight, 53, it's a relatively high number. I'm thinking maybe the over just because of the sloppy factor. And we have to look at, too, is both of these teams have returning offenses, coaching staffs, and schemes. That is huge in this pandemic-shortened offseason. So that's something we really have to keep in mind all year when you're looking at guys with new coaching staffs and all that, new offenses, new locations. How does that impact it? So that's going to be the interesting thing here. But I would say I think we have more scoring, but I bet you we see some things tonight on defense you could have used a preseason game.
I think that's an interesting thing to watch out for because where does the sloppiness hit harder? Is it going to be offense or defense?
That's it.
Of course, the other thing is we know the Texans don't have a great offensive line either, so that's kind of you got to watch out. You have Deshaun Watson running for his life,
That's it, man. And that's it. And that's why that circles me back to my David Johnson comment here, Josh, because he's running for his life. He's not. What if he can't sling it downfield? What if Cooks gets hurt in game or doesn't play? David Johnson's going to be right there. He's going to be the safety net. I think fantasy-wise, I'm going to be bullish here. I think David. I don't know what depends on the league you're in and all that. But I think fantasy-wise, we're going to come out of this game and look at David Johnson and Darren Fells and think, wow, that was a pretty impressive debut for both those guys.
And you sit around some of the rest of the league on Sunday, of course. One of the news items that came out a little bit earlier, and they just dropped that Cortland Sutton of the Broncos is a sprained AC joint. So if you're someone who drafted Cortland Sutton, what are you recommending?
Oh, first of all, condolences. That sucks. That's really crappy because you probably waited to have your fantasy football draft this week. Y'all were all prepared. You did everything right, and still it hits you. So what does that mean? It means Jerry Jeudy gets a huge bump up, right? It also means where do you look outside? Now, let's stick with the Broncos for a moment, because if you draft a Cortland Sutton, you're not just going to go find an immediate WR1, or so we wouldn't think. Somebody I would look. I'm going to skip to outside of Denver for a moment and then come back. Brian Edwards. And I've seen some drafts where people take him, some people totally ignore him, of the Raiders. Okay, same division. This guy's getting talked up more than Henry Ruggs. Everybody wants to talk about the flash, the speed, the combine skill set of Henry Ruggs. Brian Edwards, later draft pick. Tyrell Williams is done for the year. This is the big body dude, 6'4", 212. And him and Derek Carr have been developing some tremendous chemistry. And he's going to be a day one starter and, quote, is going to be leaned on heavily. That's out of Raiders camp. So if you're looking for a guy who's going to get – when you lose someone like that, you start to look, who's going to get the most reps? Opportunity equals success in fantasy football. That's what I always say. And this guy is going to get the opportunity. And we know he is. So that's where you go. If you stick with the Broncos, you start to get a little bit of a guessing game, which I don't like. So Jerry Jeudy, rookie, okay? Going to get more of a push. Can he handle it? KJ Hamler out of the slot I like, but he's listed as questionable. Maybe it's somebody like the discarded Deshaun Hamilton, who a year ago, Josh, people thought he was going to be a breakout star. Didn't really happen. Maybe this is his chance. So a little bit of a sleeper, maybe someone to pick up, is if you're looking to stay with the Broncos, is a Deshaun Hamilton.
Look, some of the other games on Sunday before we wrap it up here. I don't know what to do with this Packers-Vikings game because I love Rodgers, but I don't love the talent around him outside of Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. I like the Vikings team, but I'm not in love with as many individual players outside of Thielen and Rudolph. So what do you do with two teams that it's going to be a great football game, but maybe the options for the DFS player or the year-round fantasy player might not be as deep beyond the top-tier guys?
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up there, and I'm totally with you. I think the options are deeper on Minnesota because Dalvin Cook, it seems like, contract's good. He gave us a scare, but we saw what he could do if he's on. That guy's a bona fide stud. So I think you can roll out Dalvin Cook with confidence. Now, Adam Thielen, before the hamstring, and we've seen soft tissue stuff can nag at you, and it did really with him all year. He was pretty durable before. So Adam Thielen is somebody I think for DFS you can lean on. Now, Justin Jefferson, I really like this pick for the Vikings. I think he's somebody that I'm sort of grading him on a scale of, let's say, what DK Metcalf did last year. Not that he's the talent or ceiling of Metcalf, but in the sense that probably like the halfway point of the year, the last half of the season, that's when we really see him coming on. Because this Minnesota team, it's a 2 wide receiver starters. That's what they focus on, with 2 tight ends, and then really work the running game. So I think he's going to get some looks. Just like if I'm looking Sunday, I don't want to rely on a rookie in that type of offense. And we've seen Kyle Rudolph and Herb Smith Jr. sort of split things last year, and Rudolph's been on the decline. Maybe Smith gets more. I think they sort of cancel each other out. So I'll say Cook and Thielen for sure. And then on the Packers side, now I'm going to have my Week 1 Sleepers article come out on Sportsnet.ca on, I think it's going to come out Saturday. I'll give you guys a preview on it. It goes to the Packers. Allen Lazard. And Josh, I think we talked about earlier in the summer, like we hated what the Packers did in that draft. They gave Aaron Rodgers nothing. They gave him nothing. You gave him a backup quarterback, a crappy tight end. Come on. And a running back you didn't need. So Allen Lazard is somebody that Aaron Rodgers has talked up in the past, who's a great handcuff for Devontae Adams. Geronimo Allison, who was sort of ahead of him last year, is gone. So any extra targets intended for the wide receiver, you'd think, are going to go to Lazard. And if you look at DraftKings, he's $4,900. Yahoo leagues for season long, he's owned in 44% of leagues. That's somebody who has a You can at least see a line, like a map to where he could be successful. Will he? We'll have to wait and see.
How do you feel about the Patriots offense? Cam Newton, new quarterback. They keep claiming it's going to be a new look offense. Can't wait to see what we're going to show you. We know that Edelman is going to get targets. We know that White is a passing running back, but are you somebody who says buy on the Patriots offense or wait and see?
Boy, it's tricky with the Patriots with Belichick and then Brady on his own, because we're so used to just giving both of them the benefit of the doubt, but they've always done it together. So now it's like, okay, well, what do we see? Now we saw it not that long ago, the Patriots offense tweaked itself when Jacoby Brissett was in, right? And it showed like they were able to adapt. So that gives me a little bit of hope. But you see Cam Newton still not great weapons around him. Outside of Edelman, who's questioned, that's another guy who's always on the injured list but ends up playing. I really like N'Keal Harry as a receiver, but did he get enough reps and chemistry build with Cam Newton? I don't know. Damier Byrd? What? No. The tight end group is a disaster. They got drafted two guys who are pretty much fullbacks. Ryan Izzo excite everybody? No. Like I'd have to say I'm not buying on the Patriots offense, and I just hope for Cam Newton's sake they don't think, hey, let's do 2014 Cam Newton. Oh boy, I think if you start running around Cam Newton come October, we're going to see Jarrett Stidham in the lineup.
I hope not, because that'd be ugly football.
Oh yeah.
Andy, one more before I let you go, and I always appreciate your time. Again, follow him on Twitter at AndyMC81. You can catch him each week here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger is back. They say Juju's healthy. We know James Conner, he's got a new contract. What is your perspective on the Steelers offense? I know I'm high on them. Are you?
And this is the case. Now, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, Josh, and this kills me to say it. I am too. I don't like it. I don't like saying it, but I think Ben Roethlisberger, 38 years old, right? The elbow seems to be healthy, but we're in that stage with like the Phil Rivers. Eli's retired that age. Has father time got him? Can he stay healthy? If he doesn't, we know that offense just dies, and it's no fault of Juju. Like anybody who puts any blame on the fantasy impact of Juju Smith-Schuster last year, no, come on. What the heck? Even Duck Hodges, please stop. So when you have a healthy Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy Chase Claypool who's from Canada, he's from out in BC, this guy's going to be, I think, an absolute stud after a bit of time. Again, last half of the season, I think we see him come on. James Washington in the slot, not necessarily like a fantasy guy. Eric Ebron, I think, is someone to keep an eye on as well when it comes to tight end. We saw him flash big time once he got to Indianapolis out of Detroit. I think he could be somebody. Vance McDonald's had his chance. So when it looks to Big Ben, I think we really have to focus on him, on Juju. I've heard stuff that maybe they're going to look a little bit to more of a committee to not wear out James Conner, because we've seen that be an issue. So I'd be a little hesitant to put him in my, let's say, RB2 spot until I see how the usage goes. He could very well be, but Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, Jalen Samuels, like they've been talking all those guys up. So that's going to be difficult. But if Ben Roethlisberger comes in and dude chucks 4,500 yards, they're going to be just fine.
He's Andy McNamara. Make sure you catch him on Twitter at AndyMC81. He's always posting great insights on fantasy football, the NFL, and more. Also catch him on Sportsnet. He is writer, national fantasy sports host, analyst, and more over there on Sportsnet. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andy, always appreciate the times and insights, and we'll catch you next week.
Absolutely, Josh. Enjoy the games, everybody.
Football is back. And, of course, our conversation with Andy McNamara here on Game Night being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. We'll get back to the text board coming up next, 609-403-0973. That's the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. 609-403-0973. This is Game Night. I'm Josh Hennig, and this is 97.3 ESPN. And the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Text board is open, 609-403 0973 to playsugarhouse.com text board. We get to your text in just a moment. Don't forget, tonight, Texans, Chiefs, here on 97.3 ESPN. They're on the Texans, Titans in the same division. I wasn't horribly out of play, but no, tonight, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow is Game 7, Celtics, Raptors, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, this Sunday, Eagles football, followed by Saints and Bucks, followed by Sunday Night Football, Rams, Cowboys, and we got college football on Saturday night. Clemson, Wake Forest. We got all your sports covered right here on 97.3 ESPN. This is Game Night. I'm Josh Hennig. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hennig on Twitter. We'll get to the Eagles news about Lane Johnson from a little bit earlier, but I want to get to your text messages right now at 609-403-0973. Joey D from Ventnor chimes in. It says, Josh, I see this NFL game as a nervous, sloppy, low-scoring game, lack of playmakers on Houston. I love the under. That's Joey D and Ventnor. Well, the only problem with that, Joey, and I appreciate you always chiming in, is that I think you're underrating what some of these guys bring to the table, because when healthy, Will Fuller is a very productive player. Now, it's when healthy. You heard Andy McNamara mention a little bit earlier, a guy who's questionable tonight is Brandon Cooks. Well, if Brandon Cooks goes out there and plays, him and Will Fuller are not Andre Hopkins, but they can certainly make up some of the ground because you can still run a very high-powered offense. To me, Joey D, I go with the previous point you make. It's going to be sloppy football. It's not going to be precision football. I think there's a high chance for it to be low-scoring. Now, you heard Andy McNamara make the case that it could also be high-scoring because if the offenses are ahead of the defenses, then we could just see a colossal shootout of epic proportions. It could be absolutely insane tonight, and we might not see an ounce of defense. It might not be like that Rams game from a few years ago. That was, what was like 48, 41 or something like that. By the end of that game, it was absolutely insane. So I could totally see it going either way. I can see this being completely high-scoring or just a total sloth fest of offense because no one's actually been out there playing together. So it could go either way, but that's why we got to see it. That's why we're going to be tuned in to watch it or listen to it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins of the game tonight at 7:30. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT chimes in the playsugarhouse.com text board. It says, I have the feeling the Eagles are going to dominate and go 13-3 this year. Wentz is ready for that MVP level again. Dan from EHT goes on to say he's in the second season after the knee surgery. I think 13-3 is a little ambitious, Dan from EHT, because when I was going through the schedules for the Eagles, I was kind of hanging around more so that 10-6, 11-5 range, because I think that we're underrating some of those road games they got to play and how, like I said tonight, we're not going to know what this environment is like, but whatever the environment is like as the season progresses for the Eagles, I honestly got to be a little concerned about how many of those games they're actually going to win, because to me, and I'm not saying that I'm making the playoffs, I'm not going to be one of those guys, but listen, after the first 3 weeks, I think the first 3 weeks are all winnable. Washington, Rams, Bengals. But then you got to go to the 49ers. You got to go against the Steelers. You got the Ravens. That is 3 high-quality, high-powered playoff teams in a row. 49ers, Steelers, Ravens. And then later in the season, how about this lineup? Seahawks, November 30th. That's a primetime game right now. Eagles, Packers the next week. Eagles, Saints the week after that. Another 3-game stretch where they might not be able to come out there clean. So there's at least 2 3-game stretches on this calendar that are not divisional games that I think you got to be wary of. And I think that there's no way you're sweeping all 3 of those games each time. I think it's more likely that one of those 3 runs, you lose 2 out of 3 of them. And there's no guarantee you're going to beat the Cowboys both times this year because the Cowboys have upgraded their offensive skill players. We know that they've beefed up that defensive line. The secondary is questionable, but they beefed up the defensive line. I figure the Eagles are going to split the difference with the Cowboys. So you got 2 3-game stretches against playoff contenders. You split the season with the Cowboys. I think you're closer, Dan and EHT, to about 4 or 5 losses at this point in time than you are 3 losses. But that's how I look at it because I know the Eagles are a very good football team, but something happens every year. Somebody gets injured, right? What if somebody gets COVID and you can't play a game? There's variables that we got to factor in here. And I would love to see the Eagles go 13-3, but I just don't see it happening because I think there's going to be some lumps in the road. There's going to be some stumbling points. And I think that whether it's the 49ers, the Steelers, or the Ravens, or the Packers, the Saints, heck, even the game against the Cardinals later this year, coming up in December, that game's in Arizona. You got to travel all the way out there for that game. That might not be an easy game either because by that point in the season, the Cardinals may be fighting for a playoff spot themselves. And if you're fighting for the division and the Cardinals are fighting for a playoff spot, remember, one more team makes it this year, 7 make it. So as a result, you got to think if the Cardinals are fighting for a playoff spot and you're fighting for the division, they're going to give you everything that they got. And with DeAndre Hopkins out there, that changes a lot of things for that Cardinals offense. I think that Cardinals offense can be very dangerous. You may be able to score on that defense. The defense isn't exactly elite, but that offense can give you trouble. And I understand you got Darius Slay, but Slay can only cover one guy. Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are still out there, and Fitz is still a dangerous weapon. Think about all the attention that's going to be brought to Hopkins. That's going to open Fitzgerald to run those slot routes underneath and get another 100 catches this year potentially. So don't undersell this Eagles schedule. There's definitely, this is to me a 10-6, 11-5 schedule. And I think they could win the division. I think that their continuity they have coming into the year on both sides of the ball has a hand up over the Cowboys. Cowboys have a new defensive coordinator, a new man in charge in Dallas. I think those are going to have them a little bit inconsistent for the first half of the season. Second half of the season, Cowboys could go on a run. Cowboys could really throw down and make things a little extra difficult for the Eagles as they try to win the division. And don't get frustrated when the Eagles do lose some of these games, because it's not because they're a bad football team. It's because these other teams are really stinking good. Russell Wilson has been tormenting the Eagles for years now. If Ben Roethlisberger is anywhere near what he was before that injury, which they all claim that he is, and he's in great shape and all that stuff, and that Steelers offense is clicking on all cylinders, that's a dangerous game for the Eagles. The Ravens got the league MVP coming into the house. 49ers went to the Super Bowl last year. Aaron Rodgers, he's still got magic in that arm. So this schedule, to me, is not a 13-3 schedule. But I love the passion. I love the enthusiasm, Dan EHD. Just not seeing that high level of a schedule. 13-3 is a bit ambitious. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Texture chimes in that the Eagles are going to lose to Washington on Sunday. Chase Young is going to have multiple sacks. Haskins isn't Murray, but he will be a second-year quarterback who makes a big jump. See, here's the problem with your assumption about Eagles losing to Washington on Sunday. Number one, you're thinking of Washington under the previous regime. Okay? We understand that this is a different team. This is a defensive coaching staff. Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio. I know the defense is coming to play. I have very low confidence in the offense. And right now, they're listing J.D. McKissick as potentially the starting running back. We know Antonio Gibson is going to be a massive weapon in the NFL, but when I think of offense, I don't think of Ron Rivera teams. I think a defense. And that defensive front's a bunch of monsters. I think a defense is going to come to play. And I agree it might be a low-scoring game, and Chase Young is going to be a threat. But you know what? You're telling me that Haskins is going to have a big game against a team that has Darius Slay now out there? Darius Slay is dangerous, man. Darius Slay is a guy who's one of the best cover corners in the league. He's going to take Terry McLaurin. He's going to take him out of the game. And now you're going to ask guys like Steve Sims to beat you. I like the Eagles' chances against Steve Sims. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm crazy. But you know what? Sims doesn't scare me. Because if it's Avonte Maddox or Nickel Roby-Coleman on him, I'm not too worried about that. And by the way, it's not like Haskins has the greatest offensive line in the world. Remember, Trent Williams isn't there anymore. He's over there in San Francisco. That offensive line for Washington isn't elite. So you're telling me that Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, how about Malik Jackson? He's back and healthy, even if Hargrave isn't back. Those guys can get after Haskins, and Haskins is not a mobile quarterback. Russell Wilson and those guys, Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray, they're mobile quarterbacks. Haskins doesn't have that kind of athleticism. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open 609-403-0973. I don't want to overlook the story right now on 97.3 ESPN.com. Lane Johnson restructures his deal. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because Lane Johnson has proven himself again to be a team-first guy. And I don't think we give this guy enough credit. Lane Johnson now, for the second time in the last few years, has agreed to restructure his contract. Now, the thing for Lane is they're not just opening up $5 million in cap room on the Eagles cap, but also it gives Lane a little bit extra money up front. But this is the second time that Lane has agreed to a restructure. Remember, it was after they won the Super Bowl that the Eagles created $7.5 million in cap space. And he took a little bit of a pay cut for a little bit so the team could bring back certain guys and make sure everybody was back in the fold for the 2018 season. This is the same guy that when he got suspended, he lost about $25 million in guaranteed money. And instead of crying about it, instead of boo-hooing about it, you know what he said? He owned it. The guy's an all-pro right tackle. The guy's a first. I mean, this guy is going to be first team at least one or two more times in his career as a tackle. And he's a team-first guy. I don't think we give this guy enough credit. This may be one of the most important players, if not the most important player on the team. Because whenever he doesn't play, the offense struggles. If Jason Peters misses time, you'll find a way as long as Lane Johnson's out there. But if you lose Lane Johnson and Jason Peters is out there, I'm telling you right now, I don't have as much confidence. Lane Johnson's a team guy. He's an elite player. And not once, but twice now, he's agreed to restructure his contract for the greater good of the team. That deserves a little hand applause, in my opinion. Coming up tonight, Texans, Chiefs. Coverage begins at 7:30 on 97.3 ESPN. I mentioned the stat earlier. The team coming off the Super Bowl in their first game the next year are 7-3. I think that goes to 8-3 tonight. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, though. I think it's going to be closer to maybe 28-21 because we've seen no real game action. I think Mahomes still finds a way to win the game. By the way, 28-21, that means the Texans cover the spread. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even a little closer than that. Maybe it's even 30-27. I think it's going to be a very interesting game. And I'm excited. Football is back. You hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow on Game Night, we'll be joined by expert film man with the NFL, Andy Benoit, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Have a great night.